From Maryland, Mr. Sarbanes is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for doing this very important hearing. There's two things that should make us really nervous about this phishing expedition, this sham audit that was conducted by Cyber Ninjas. One is that Cyber Ninjas doesn't really have the qualifications to conduct this kind of an audit in an authentic fashion, and so that's obviously a source of real concern. The other is how this thing was funded, and I know a couple of my colleagues have already referred to it, but I'd like to go into that a little bit more. We know the Arizona Senate only agreed to pay Cyber Ninjas, I think, $150,000 for the audit, which was far short of what was ultimately needed to conduct this thing. Instead, what happened was the Republican Party in Arizona went out to raise funds from dark money groups, these 501c4 groups with ties to President Trump and ties to the big lie narrative. And they raised $6.7 million from those groups, which was 98% of the cost of the audit overall. Ms. Ramachandran, does the public have visibility into the donors who contributed to these 501c4 groups?
Thank you so much for that question. No, there's been minimal transparency into the donors. There's been a small amount of disclosure from Mr. Logan about some of the top groups, the top C4s that you mentioned, as far as who in turn has donated to those groups. I'm not aware of any publicity on that front.
And are legitimate election audits usually funded by dark money groups? Why or why not?
Thank you. Legitimate election audits are usually performed by election officials with members of the political parties present, observing, and with meetings open to the public. They're not very costly. They are generally funded from within the budget for the elections office, and it would be ideal for them to continue to be funded in that way. I know that in the Freedom to Vote Act, Congress has called for risk limiting audits and has also called for appropriations to help support election officials in moving towards those audits.
Thanks very much. That's how it ought to operate. You know, if you look at some of these groups that funded the audit, this sham audit, you've got a nonprofit chaired by former National Security Advisor for Donald Trump, Michael Flynn. That was $1 million coming in from that group. Former Trump lawyer Sidney Powell's group provided over $500,000 to support this inquiry that was conducted. Patrick Byrne, we heard this before from my colleague, Congressman Hank Johnson, prominent businessman, supporter of former President Trump, heads a group that contributed over $3.4 million to this audit. All three of these individuals, the ones I just mentioned, by the way, in last December, Ms. Powell, Mr. Flynn, Mr. Byrne took part in an Oval Office meeting where they reportedly encouraged President Trump to take steps to overturn the election, including by seizing Dominion voting machines. So, Ms. Ramachandran, would you question the impartiality of any audit that was primarily funded by groups headed by these three individuals?
Absolutely. I would question the impartiality, and I would add that objectivity is a minimal standard that's required for an audit to provide confidence for the public.
I have to say, Mr. Bennett made a comment apparently that he told reporters it doesn't matter who paid for it when he was referring to the audit, but I disagree with that completely. It matters a great deal. When your salary and your security and 98% of the entire audit is paid for by people who want to overturn the election and maybe even the losing candidate himself, because we know Donald Trump was certainly interested in getting in there and supporting these efforts. That should make everyone question its impartiality and its results. I'm glad you mentioned the Freedom to Vote Act. This is another reason why we have to pass it, to shine a light on this dark money in politics, require all organizations involved in political activity to disclose their donors. The current system allows big money contributors, special interests to hide the source of their political spending. We have to fix that. We need to do it for the public and to lift up the credibility of our political system. So passing the Freedom to Vote Act would certainly help that. Thanks very much, Madam Chair, and I yield back my time.